Malkin, the Chairman, President, and CEO of Empire State Realty Trust, one of the New York area's top owners and operators of commercial real estate. Tony is a leader in energy efficiency retrofit, and we will learn more about his groundbreaking retrofit project at the Empire State Building. So timing is so good now, I will hand it over to David Preiser, co-president of Houlihan Lokey, to start the discussion.
Thank you, Cindy. Here. Tony, please sit down. All right. So Cindy already did, I think, her usual excellent job of introducing you and me to a lesser degree, and thank you. So we can get right into it, Tony. And thank you all for attending. This should be a very interesting conversation.
We're actually watching cartoons here, which to me is...
Yeah, you know, they're animated.
Screens.
So Tony.
David.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for doing this with us. And your family's been an important force in the development of the modern real estate industry and real estate finance. In fact, I think it was your grandfather who had a leading role in inventing or originating the GPLP limited partnership ownership structure, which allowed a broader, much broader class of investors to begin deploying capital in the real estate, commercial real estate sectors. Why don't we start with that? I think it'd be interesting for our audience.
Right. So actually, my grandfather, Lawrence A. Ween, named so by his father because his father wanted him to become a lawyer, and the initials spelled law. He actually set up something. The GPLP structure didn't exist back in 1934. You could be a corporation and you could limit liability, or you could be a general partnership and have flow-through taxation. And that was the idea, flow-through taxation. And so what he did is he developed a structure whereby he created two general partnerships. One that was called the master partnership. It either owned the fee or a master lease, and it had a multitude of members. And the second had a very small number of members, and that was the operating group. And he set up a lease between the master and the operating group such that and the terms of the lease were that the master group had no say whatsoever in the operation of the asset. It only had a say in the sale, refinancing, or change in the terms of the partnership. And as a result, therefore, was shielded from liability. And that was the big breakthrough, because wealthy people could pay for properties in a taxed environment with flow-through single-level taxation, and corporations were taxed twice. So this made the individual investor able to compete on a par with wealthy investors. It was a huge breakthrough. He believed that everyone should invest in real estate as a part of estate planning, retirement, and diversification.
It was great. It became obviously an important step in building your family's involvement in the New York and nationally in commercial real estate, of course.
Indeed, yes. He was a brilliant man. He accomplished a tremendous amount. And he was a tremendous philanthropist, along with John D. Rockefeller Jr., was the co-sponsor of Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts. He also was a co-founder of Brandeis University, and anybody who goes to Columbia knows that Ween is pretty much all over around up there, because that's where he went. So he believed that any money he left behind was wasted. That's why I work so hard.
Well, so to that topic, despite your family's broad involvement in the real estate world, you chose to start your own career on a different path and began building a very successful career, I think, in private equity and venture capital.
Correct.
So, but somehow they lured you back in, sort of like in The Godfather, right?
Well, I think that was Godfather Part 3.
Yeah.
But no, what actually happened was that my mom said to me, your brother's been working with your father and your grandfather all the way through. My brother did a JD MBA program, and she said, he's going to be in charge, older brother. So you two will just have to figure it out, but he's in charge. To which I said, okay, I'll do something else. And that's how I ended up. I said, if I wanted to learn about business, what were the things that would be worthwhile? I thought the number one thing I'd want to try to do is venture capital. And the second would be consulting. The third would be investment banking. And the fourth would be banking. And I'd done summer internships in investment banking and banking. And that was back in 1984, the fall of '84, and I sent out over 65 letters. I got 2 phone calls and 1 interview and 1 job.
That's all you need.
That's correct.
One job's enough. So so you were happily and productively engaged and moving deeply into that world, and then what? The RTC recession came along. Your brother decided to split off from the family business to some degree.
My grandfather died
Yeah.
on December 10, 1988, and my dad said that your brother and I will split up. My brother's gone on to be very successful. Anyone who's familiar with Value Retail or Bicester Village over in London, he's the 95% owner of the New York Islanders and just finished building UBS Arena. So he's done very well. And my dad said, would you come and help out? And I said, I'll give you 3 years. And I'm still here.
Right, and it just happened to be 3 years of a major real estate recession.
Good learning environment.
Right, and so you came in and were instantly hit with all these challenges, and whoever said never let a good crisis go to waste, it doesn't seem like you wasted that one either. You used the opportunity to get your arms around the business and make a lot of seemingly great changes.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I just in August of last year, I guess we closed. August of this year. We're still in 22. We closed on the sale of the first property I ever bought, which was from the FDIC before the RTC was created. I still have the paddle from Christie's framed in my in my conference room off of my desk. I don't have an office because we're all out in the open, and in any event, yes, I restarted the syndication business, and I had my Scarlett O'Hara moment, if anybody remembers the scene before intermission, as God is my witness, I'll never go hungry again. For me, it was, as God is my witness, we'll never be so concentrated in liquid and have personal guarantees again. And on that basis, therefore, we not only continued in the real estate business with syndication, we also began to diversify out of real estate for the first time as a family through the family office that I run, and then along the way we closed down a family law firm. Of course, there is no such thing as a family law firm, but it had been a family of lawyers. We closed down our relationship with Mrs. Helmsley and her Wing and Monkeys, and we had a 5-year litigation with Donald Trump. And then I consolidated it all up in a roll-up and did an IPO, which was primarily a giant secondary offering of the Helmsley Estates interests in these partnerships. Leona Helmsley's husband, Harry Helmsley, is my grandfather's best pal and partner, and here we are.
It was a very innovative structure. You got a lot of recognition for that at the time, and I'm not sure the public markets has ever been used quite that way up till that point, but quite an accomplishment.
Some of that recognition was undesired. but that said, I can only think of the Bob Dylan song "Tough Mama," where it ends. I've gained some recognition, but I've lost my appetite. So, but we keep going forward. We just have we continue to acquire assets. We continue to sell assets, and it's been a great experience. We've got a great team.
And you need to have a great team
to
accomplish these kinds of things. So one of the things that you that you wrestled with as you were pulling together all of these complexities was the Empire State Building itself, and your family obviously had a long involvement with the property in various ways, but it was held in a very complicated structure all unto itself.
Yep.
And so it took quite a lot of effort within this larger effort of restructuring the family holdings to sort of sort out and simplify the ownership of the Empire State Building.
Well, it was interesting because the Empire State Building was acquired in December of 1961 by my grandfather and father, really primarily my grandfather, through a syndication. This humorous story that my grandfather personally guaranteed $20 million. People said to him, afterwards, how could you possibly have done that? He said, it was easy, I didn't have it. But that said, he had tried to buy interests in that building for a long time. And the Crown family, at the time, Colonel Henry Crown, had an interest in General Dynamics, and General Dynamics had some accounting issues, and they needed before December 31, 1961 to infuse capital. And that presented a window, and my grandfather did the acquisition. It was a syndication that sold over 3,000 full units of syndication, many of which were broken into smaller pieces. There were 3 master lease groups. He sold the land as part of a financing structure to Prudential, which ended up selling it to Oliver Grace as a front for Hideki Yokoi, who was a Yakuza in Japan, who then went to jail, and one of his illegitimate children took the deed out of his safe in his office, struck a partnership with Donald Trump, and that spawned 5 years of fun, culminating in our winning the litigation and acquiring the fee and consolidating the fee. And then when all that was said and done, that was 2001, and we were still in litigation with Leona Helmsley, which we settled in August of 2006. The IPO was 2013, so the Empire State rebuilding really keyed off in August of 2006.
Really quite amazing. So putting all of those pieces together, unifying and streamlining the ownership structure, using the public markets to help you sort it all out, and finally getting basically a free hand to redevelop and realize your vision for the property. That's when the real work began, though, right?
Well, actually, we started the redevelopment Mrs. Helmsley was still alive, and then she passed, and then with her trustees and executors still involved. So that was really a matter of sometimes things are just hard.
Right.
And at the same time, my CFO is absolutely CFO plus. She's just absolutely outstanding. 8 years at Morgan Stanley, 2.5 years with us. I was in a meeting with her with someone the other day, and the person was in the process of getting a review, and the person had made comments about how so-and-so makes things difficult. And she made, my CFO, Christina Chu, made the comment, if you let yourself be thwarted because of challenge, you own that. And if you figure out a way to get over a challenge and succeed, you own that too. I found that really crystallized about 20 years of my life in about 30 seconds, and I wish she had been able to tell me that when I started in the journey. But we did these improvements. I got a $450 million line of credit from HSBC from this confused structure, having acquired the fee. But the fee was acquired by the master lease group, not by the operating lease group, because Mrs. Helmsley's estate would not agree to contribute that. And we got this line of credit to improve the building while we were still in this fractured ownership. So it was really it's crazy stuff.
Financing around that must have been quite an adventure. Obviously.
It was basically stroke-inducing.
Yeah.
However, we got it done.
So, but let's step back for a second. So, and this, I guess we're talking about starting this in the mid to late 1990s and then proceeding right through as you gradually streamlined and simplified the ownership structure at the same time.
Yep.
But right along through that period, look, Empire State Building, world's most famous building, but not a new building. Mm-hmm. Built in the early 1930s, systems to go with it, and yet you had this vision of what it could become as a modern, energy-efficient building, a leader in clean indoor air quality, and an extremely desirable and profitable enterprise again, where maybe it had, was showing its age a bit when you got your arms around it. How did you get there? What inspired you to see what the Empire State Building could become when lots of people own older buildings, sometimes iconic ones, and, you know, yet you found a way to see that future where others might not have.
So we'd already pioneered an awful lot of work in the building renovation and upgrade. I guess you would call it expertise. We acquired this expertise. First, we bought a bunch of busted deals in the suburbs. We fixed them up, leased them up, sold them. And then we began to do work with some of these legacy assets in New York City, 10 million square feet in total are the properties in the REIT. And we actually sat with the Helmsley estate and we considered the sale, when peace broke out, we considered the sale of the building. And we thought we could sell the building at the time for $1.75 to $2 billion. So the Empire State Building, in case people don't know, is 2.85 million square feet. And we've got the observatory in there. Contrary to what many people think, we had always disclosed the performance of the observatory because the Empire State Building Associates offering was a registered with the SEC private placement. So we had filed Ks and Qs since, or I was born in June of '62, so I didn't file anything for a period of time.
Too many different owners to be private, right?
That's right.
Yep.
That was too big a group to be a
Right.
private offering.
Yep.
Exactly correct. So anyhow, I said to my dad, I said, look, here's really the question. I think we can, you know, to sell the building now, candidly, would be, and this was 2006, to sell the building now would be to accept defeat. It would cash out. I think we can do a lot more with this asset. And the thing that you need to know is, it'll cost $500 million. And he said, God, it's a lot of money. I said, on a per square foot basis, it's no more than we've spent at the other buildings. Slightly more because we've got an observatory and a broadcast activity. And still yet, it's pretty much within the range of what we spent at the other properties. And he said, do you think you can do this? And I said, yes, I'm highly confident we can do this. It'll take time. It'll cost a lot of money. And he said, then let's do that. And my dad is still alive. He'll be 89 in January. And he basically gave me the keys to the balance sheet. And then, again, a great team of people who've done a number of these types of activities in other buildings. You know, together we did this. And so we started the Empire State Rebuilding Program. And a critical component of this, if in 2006 you knew someone who worked in the Empire State Building, he, she, or they was either a dentist, a travel agent, an employment agency, or maybe you'd gotten a nanny through an office there. Maybe you bought a hat band or a belt or a handbag or hosiery in a, you know, for your department store in one of their showrooms. There is nobody we knew as a tenant. Today, the Empire State Building's largest tenant is LinkedIn with over 600,000 square feet. It's one of the most energy efficient buildings of any age in the world. We put $165 million into the observatory alone. That is now the #1 attraction, according to TripAdvisor, in the United States. #3 in the world to #1, the Colosseum in Rome, #2, Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. She's 91 years young. It is the best brand in the world. We built this brand through a tremendous amount of effort in social media and digital. We do a tremendous amount of work. You know, if a Kardashian shows up for an appearance, people pay for a Kardashian to show up. The Kardashians ask if they can come and have a photo taken at the Empire State Building. And depending upon which one it is, we say yes or no. So the idea was, how do you make this transformation? So we chose to do a couple of things. First thing we did is we said we're going to redo the lobby. We're going to restore the building. The lobby ceiling had been landmarked with lucite panels and fluorescent glass over the original aluminum and gold leaf, not silver, but aluminum and gold leaf. images of the celestial sky rendered in gears and cogs of the engineering age. We replaced all of this plastic sidelight that had been originally lead forged glass with the original molds that were in the Corning Museum, the Museum of Glass in Corning, New York. We replaced 67 elevators with belt drive, not cables, belt drive. Otis, latest iteration, regen, destination dispatch. Regen, what does that mean? As our elevators go down, they power other elevators that are going up in a closed loop system within the building. We decided to make the Empire State...
Don't brush past that. It was really quite interesting. So you recapture the energy involved in lifting the elevators,
typical
Yeah.
elevator, the speed is controlled through brakes, which generate heat, which requires air conditioning. We use a digital motor generator that generates power instead of heat, a little bit of heat, and it generates power to drive elevators going up the other way. So about 40% of the energy that is used by our elevators is generated by elevators which are
Right.
going down.
Yeah, heat is just wasted energy. So instead,
Yep.
you're utilizing that and getting it recaptured and
a critical component to that is the energy efficiency piece. I started out, my wife had been on the board of the Natural Resources Defense Council at that point for about 16 years. She recently stepped down as a trustee emerita at this point after 25 years. And so we thought about the greening of the building as a differentiating component from a marketing perspective. And what we realized was, what I learned over time is that greening cost money and didn't produce a result. What people called greening at that time, bike racks, showers, plant walls, water features, that was greening. And it's a funny story. I was inadvertently, through a series of events, I was introduced to Ira Magaziner, who used to be the chief of staff in the Clinton White House and who was the head of the Clinton Climate Initiative, part of the Clinton Global Initiative at the time. And I got a quick lesson about the fact that buildings, which exist for people to live, work, recreate, learn, get healed, all those activities produce more greenhouse gas than any other activity in the city of New York. 70% of energy consumed in New York City is consumed by buildings. And therefore, buildings are the largest outputters of greenhouse gases. So we actually approach things from a different angle. We approach things from the perspective of, let's make it the most energy efficient building in the world. Let's prove we can retrofit this building and make it a distinctive marketing advantage. And we worked with Amory Lovins of the Rocky Mountain Institute, Johnson Controls, and Jones Lang LaSalle. And I've got to tell you, this was the wild frontier. No one had ever done this before. And since that work, we have reduced our energy consumption in the Empire State Building and our greenhouse gas output by over 50%. And we did it by the integration of energy efficient measures within the work we already had to do to retrofit the building. We had a contract with Jones Lang LaSalle and Johnson Controls to guarantee a 38% reduction. So we got, at this point, we're up to 54%. We've continued to do other work. We studied 64 different aspects of services and products. And what we discovered is that 8 in combination could achieve this result. And then not only did we, and then we announced it, the day we signed the contract, we announced it with President Clinton and Mayor Bloomberg and Amory Lovins. And it was freaking awesome, we also, as we discussed before, we started to experiment with indoor environmental quality because we're a huge believer. So this environment right in here is extremely unhealthy. Okay, just so you know. If anybody has COVID, there's a good chance we'll all have it. The lighting is not very good. When you think about work quality, it's certainly not good right here for David and me.
No, it's terrible. It's also not natural spectrum.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you think about indoor environmental quality, it's temperature control, it's the cleanliness of the air, it's the degree of fresh air, it's the carbon dioxide content of the air. And so we've done a lot of work in this area. We started because of SARS. We started to experiment with MERV-13 filters and active bipolar ionization to create cleanliness. And as David spoke about earlier, because he's actually involved with the company with which we pioneered these installations, active bipolar ionization actually ionizes the air, and so long as it is monitored correctly, it's totally healthy. What it does is it causes the stuff in the air that's unhealthy to clump together, and then it's more easily picked up in the air filters. So if you go to the Empire State Building Observatory, that entire space is MERV-13 filters and active bipolar ionization. The lobby of the Empire State Building, my offices, which are not in the Empire State Building because we charge high rent at the Empire State Building, and I occupy a space that would get less rent. And we've rolled these out and these energy efficiency measures throughout our entire portfolio. And I know we want to get onto other subjects in the remaining 3 hours that we have. But the thought here is, when we did the work we did, we published it. And we published it for free. We didn't copyright it. We didn't patent it. And all the other work we've done since, which we've rolled out through our entire portfolio in version 2.0 that we just completed in a public-private partnership with the New York State Energy Research Development Authority, and that was announced with Mayor now Adams, President Clinton again, and Governor Hochul just earlier in the spring. All of this work is published and available online, free.
Which is, it's really actually very cool. And you also, it wasn't just the ongoing things, even in the course of the renovation, to reduce the carbon footprint and impact and waste from redoing the building, you reused quite a bit of the material. You want to talk about that a little bit? I thought that was very cool.
What we've discovered is that what we're talking about when all this stuff is what I like to refer to as building porn. But one of the greatest, the centerfold might be that we took 6,514 windows, which had already been replaced about 13 years before. We built a glass factory on site, a window factory, not a glass factory, but a window factory. And we took the windows out. We brought them down to the window factory. We broke the seals, popped them open, cleaned them, put in a Mylar sheet, resealed them with krypton argon gas in the vacuum, and reinstalled them. We took them from an R2 to an R7.5. R is resistance to heat-cold transfer. A well-insulated masonry wall is R15. We reused 96% of the windows and frames, and not a single one of those left the building. We did it all in-house, inside. So there's no rubbish in the street, there's no traffic and truckage moving on. We also have programs throughout our portfolio for water waste reduction, actual waste reduction. We recycle over 80% of our construction debris when we refit offices and the like. So anyhow, and by the way, along with indoor environmental quality, which is in every single one of our pre-builts. We do pre-builts of 2,500 to 10,000 square feet in our portfolio. Every single one of them is MERV-13 filters and active bipolar ionization. And that's how we box above our weight, and we're the sort of the older building flight to quality option for office users in New York City.
You can tell this is a very complicated process to get this right. I think you've said there's no silver bullet. There's a whole lot of different things you have to bring together. What did you call it? Silver buckshot?
Silver buckshot.
And yet they all come together in a synergistic way, and it becomes a very powerful and compelling effect.
Version 2.0 with NYSERDA. Remember, version 1.0, we looked at 64 different measures. We chose 8. Version 2.0, which we have begun to roll out through our portfolio, we looked at over 255 different measures. That's how the world has changed as far as services, products and processes, controls, availability.
So you've got a room full of finance people here. So obviously, you're not, even though you believe in this, I think, with great passion, and understandably so, you also do it because it makes economic sense. And that's been a pillar of your message to the community and to the entire industry, which is, don't do this just because it's the right thing to do, although it is. Do it because it makes potentially enormous economic and financial sense. And let's start by proving that by building, a strong baseline for analysis and go from there.
Right.
Maybe that's worth talking to. I think everyone will find that very interesting.
So, we were the first people to put into our, by the way, I was trying to figure out who the guy is filming, and I realized that's one of my people. By the way, anybody who wants to go online and check out Emma Preiser, who is our, Tyler's shutting this off. He doesn't want to hear about himself. We have a mascot for the Empire State Building named Emma Preiser. It's quite big, and it needs to be moved around. It's a she. She's Emma. And Tyler is inside Emma. Anyhow, sorry. I now feel much more comfortable knowing who that is. But anyway, going back to the question, what we do is we make it less expensive for ourselves, and we make it less expensive for our tenants. We were one of the first people to make mandates of green lease language in tenant leases. And we are green lease platinum leaders with the Environmental Protection Agency, which is the highest level you can get. We score a 96 on our GRESB, which is the highest for disclosure, 95 overall for our portfolio, which ties with the highest in our peer group. Tenants who move into our buildings cannot use volatile organic off-gassing compounds. No new carpet, and restrictions on the types of wall coverings, paints, and adhesives that can be used. What do we get? We get a healthier building. We get a healthier place for our tenants. We also require energy efficiency measures. What do they get in return for that? Lower costs. After rent and compensation, energy is the highest bill for the occupancy of space in an office building. So our tenants actually get a competitive advantage, and we quantify all of this because through the quantification of it, we are able to allow our tenants to be able to go to their corporate headquarters and say, this is the contribution we have made through our space choice to our corporate goals to reduce our carbon footprint, to our CSR, our corporate social responsibility objectives. So this is all about profit. The payback on the incremental cost for version 1.0 of our work at the Empire State Building was projected to be 5 years. It took just over 3.5. The payback for the changes you have to make when you lease space in one of our buildings compared to somebody else out in the random open is 3 years. If you lease a pre-built from us, and we offer those everything from pre-built to pre-built, pre-wired, pre-built, pre-wired, pre-furnished, pre-built, pre-wired, pre-furnished, and we'll do the move for you. That's already built into the rent. And the idea is it's about competition for profit and measurement, not points for lead, measurement as in science-based targets and engineering-based calculations. That's what we're about, and that's what we offer. And we do this in a way, candidly, which I call sort of, if you will, benevolent aggression. Because not only we do it to get our tenants, we're a public company. Through 3/4 of this year so far, we've leased nearly 1 million square feet. That's not too far from what we did in 2019. So the whole idea is that by the differentiation of our portfolio, we can attract the best credits at the highest rents for our asset type, older office buildings, with patina, as we like to say, on longer-term leases. So it's all about making money and to be more competitive.
Which is fantastic. It's fantastic that you're doing it, and it's fantastic to know that it's possible to do such important work and make a real financial return. And that's a message that is very valuable to get out into the world, so I'm glad we're doing that. Let's just telescope back a little bit and talk about how important that is to our society, to our cities, to our country. You know, you touched on it before, but it's worth looking at it in the macro. Older office and commercial buildings are very large and inefficient users of energy. And you mentioned it, they produce substantial greenhouse gas emissions, they use a tremendous amount of power off the power grid, very inefficiently. All the steps you're describing for your buildings address that to a large degree.
But I'm going to correct you. I want to correct you on one thing before we get
please,
to your second point. Buildings do not consume energy. Occupants consume energy.
Fair.
Number one. Number two, glass and mass, and that's what we have in our buildings, glass and mass, is way more efficient than the newest, quote, efficient, unquote, all-glass buildings. All glass can compete if you have glass that's about this thick, cost a bloody fortune, and require the buildings, a modern building, to be made with a much more robust steel frame, concrete frame, core, and construction. All right? So we actually, the other thing I want to point out is that we actually, through the repurposing of our buildings, buildings are massive carbon sinks. All right? Glass, concrete, masonry, steel, copper, or if you're unfortunate enough to have aluminum wiring. There's an immense amount of carbon that went into the manufacture of these. So the whole thought, scrape it clean and build new, destroys it. Buildings are essentially like forests. They are a store of embodied carbon. So it's very important that we make use, good use, of the existing building stock that we have. 90% of what will be here in 2050 in the United States is here already, unless we tear it down. Anyhow, sorry, go ahead. You have
No, that's really quite important. So the answer is not to tear it down, truck it off to the dump, and build something new. It's to make better use of what we have and make our cities embrace that idea.
Build new when and as needed and merited. It does not make sense to build new, inefficient buildings.
Right.
It just doesn't.
And let's talk a little bit about why this is so, it's always been important, but it's particularly important now as a society. We think we're doing the right thing by moving toward widespread electrification of our automobile industry, of many other parts of society, in the name of efficiency, in the name of lower carbon impact on our environment. But what does that really mean in terms of the demands we place on our electric grid and our ability to generate power if we don't also embrace building efficiency into what we already have?
Okay, so
let's talk about that.
Yeah, there are two things I think we need to understand. One is the inefficient building. Let's take that as a given. The inefficient building, people who make long-term capital investments in inefficient systems in buildings will be a tremendous reducer of value to those buildings over time. That's one thing you have to think about. It's a valuation piece. Something we had chatted about before, and I noticed we're down to the last 2.5 hours, so we got to be careful.
We're doing great.
So we can maybe touch on that in a moment. But as to the subject about the grid, if we electrify everything, and that's the present plan of Local Law 97 in New York City and the plan of a lot of other places, eliminate fossil fuels, and there's some ridiculousness in that. The load on our grid, where we already, as people know, if you see lights dimmed in your lobby or the office gets hotter on hot days, it's because we go through demand reduction for Con Ed so that the whole grid doesn't collapse. Well, picture this. In an all-electric city with an all-electric buildings, the peak consumption will be in wintertime, not summer, for heating. And what are we going to do there? Well, it's going to get colder, not hotter in your building. And we want to shift to renewables. So what we need to do is we need to bring out energy efficiency throughout the built environment, because that will reduce the load. And through the reduction of load, we can make the existing infrastructure sustain us, and we can reduce, I've got all kinds of people from my office here, I'm noticing, and we can reduce our, I'm just picking out, they're keeping track of me. We can reduce the amount of renewables that need to be installed in order to power the businesses, which are critical to our economy. So that electrification is a two-edged sword. Don't just think, oh, we're going to electrify everything. First of all, you want to reduce the load because in order to build out the systems that will, which will make use of that electricity, that too generates more carbon. And what we do is we offshore our carbon, because we don't manufacture an awful lot of building materials, glass, steel, in the United States. It comes from China, it comes from Canada, it comes from Mexico. Doesn't mean that the carbon isn't being produced, we just don't produce it here. So right steps, right order from Amory Levin's lesson learned. Integrate energy efficiency into how you make the decisions to spend money that you must spend. It's not an afterthought, it's central to the thought. And there are some amazing tax credits and deductions in the new Inflation Reduction Act, otherwise known as the IRA. We call it IRA because we've personified it.
Inflation Reduction Act, but it's really an infrastructure bill for
it's really an infrastructure
bill and renewable energy and such, right?
And renewable energy on site, energy storage on site, those all generate, depending upon how you do it, they can generate up to 3 times the tax credits of your cost. And as the chair of the Sustainability Policy Advisory Committee of the Real Estate Roundtable is the umbrella organization for lobbying in DC. That and Reg 179D adjustments to something which are already on the books for tax deductions, tax credits which can be sold, tax deductions which can be taken against taxes. Those are all things put into that bill by us in the real estate industry and the Sustainability Policy Advisory Committee. Made possible because we've been working with people on the Hill for 10 years on this stuff. So when the opportunity came around for this to happen, they came to us as authorities and said, what can we do? We said, do this.
It's very interesting and a real opportunity, I think, for many people to take advantage of some of those tax credits and build on your good works here.
And got to get the tax people and the capital people and the sustainability people to work together when you make plans and you look at your capital expenditure. Sorry, you want to let's move on.
No, I think we're good. We can open it up to a few questions, I think, but this has been very interesting, Tony, and thank you very much. Let's do we have a microphone here?
Thank you very much. A great presentation and good wishes to your dad on his birthday coming up in January. And I hate to take a poke at somebody on Park Avenue, happens to the initials JPM, and they sort of did that and now they're rebuilding it. To me that, and I'm not in the real estate, but to me that's what you're saying. It really doesn't make sense to take down something that's still functional, still reasonable, the carbon's there, and then recarbonize this other efficient building supposedly. And it just, am I wrong in seeing that? And I'm not taking shots at somebody.
Right.
But you know
So interestingly enough, Jamie Dimon wants to dominate everything, and he also wants to be the leader in sustainability. So on that particular project, they recycled their construction debris, the demolition, which is great. Number one. Number two, they are all electric. They actually said this no longer works. Whether or not it did or did not, one could call into question. Floor plates perhaps weren't ideal. You know, their buildings, they'd spent a lot of money to renovate those buildings more than a decade ago. They didn't really spend it on systems and energy efficiency. However, he has mandated that they make the right decisions on their way towards their HQ. Whether or not it made maximum sense, who knows? However, it was done in the right way.
Do you have someone following you?
Well, Matt Arnold, who was the Chief Sustainability Officer for JP Morgan Chase, is now actually working at WRI, World Resources Institute. At the time, is a good friend, and I've known him actually since college. And they're good people. They're smart people who work. For the decision they made, they did it as well as they could.
We have time for another question. Go ahead.
Yeah, can you give me your views on like the industrial space, what you think's going on there? You know, are you a buyer or a seller in there?
So, first of all, even industrial space can be made more sustainable, and the folks from Prologis are on the Sustainability Policy Advisory Committee. Second of all, you know, I can't see how growth diminishes in commerce, e-commerce, or actually e-commerce begins to shrink back, and we don't have. Yeah, I think it's the demand. I believe that the bottom line, we're probably oversupplied on logistics, warehouse distribution, and we'll see we'll see an increase in cap rates. We'll see a decrease in rents, and at the moment, the way it'll reflect itself is a decrease in growth of demand and rents, and then it will fall down.
One more question? Okay.
All good.
I think we were very thorough.
Thanks
Thank you
very
so much. I really enjoyed it.